The human body is an incredibly complex, self-regulating architecture built from a foundation of roughly 30 trillion highly specialized cells. To understand how this machine operates, we have to look past the familiar macroanatomy of limbs and organs and examine the raw elemental mass that forms these cellular building blocks. This diagram maps our elemental composition. Oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen make up over 93% of total mass. Trace elements like calcium, phosphorus, and potassium are microscopic in volume. Combined, they make up less than 1%, yet are strictly required for cellular function. These individual atoms of gas and metal are not alive. Biology is the study of how these distinct, non-living elements self-organize into a conscious system capable of resisting entropy. Inside the body, human cells are embedded in an extracellular matrix, a scaffolding of proteins like collagen, completely surrounded by fluid. Those 30 trillion human cells share this space with an estimated 38 trillion commensal bacteria living in the gut and on the skin. The operational engine directing all this cellular activity is DNA, housed inside the nucleus. This genetic code faces constant degradation, experiencing tens of thousands of damage and repair events every single day to maintain the viability of the cell. This diagram illustrates how these individual cells group together into distinct categories. Histology categorizes these structures into 4 fundamental tissue types: epithelia, connective, muscle, and nerve tissue. At this microscopic scale, physical shape dictates chemical capability. The specific layering and structure of a tissue strictly determines the mechanical job that the resulting organ can perform. An adult male body is approximately 60% water, holding around 42 liters of total fluid. These fluids operate under distinct chemical rules. The fluid trapped inside the cells relies heavily on potassium and phosphates, while the extracellular fluid surrounding them requires a strict balance of sodium and chloride. To keep these fluids moving through the tissue matrices, the body requires a central mechanical pump. This cross-section shows the heart's 4 chambers. An electrical system controls the rhythm, firing from the sinoatrial node through the atria to the ventricles. Contracting the upper atria first fills the lower chambers, boosting cardiac output by 75% before the main ventricular contraction begins. This pump acts in tandem with the respiratory system. As the diaphragm creates a downward vacuum, it pulls oxygen into tiny alveolar sacs in the lungs, transferring the gas directly across capillary beds into the bloodstream. When these transport lines are compromised, whether by plaque in coronary arteries or damaged alveoli and emphysema, the result is a mechanical blockade. The cellular ecosystem starves from a lack of oxygen delivery. To extract the energy required to power this pump, the digestive tract uses systematic muscle contractions called peristalsis. This pushes food into the stomach, where gastric acids break it down into a fluid called chyme. Looking at the lower half of this digestive system diagram, the actual extraction occurs in the intestines, which pull amino acids, fats, and ions into the body. The gallbladder aids this phase by releasing stored bile into the small intestine to digest fats. The urinary system operates as a massive, continuous chemical filtration engine. The kidneys pull an immense workload, filtering roughly 170 liters of blood daily through microscopic nephrons. They reclaim the vast majority of water and electrolytes back into the bloodstream, excreting only 1 or 2 liters of concentrated waste as urine. Homeostasis is an incredibly active, energy-intensive equilibrium that requires constant chemical extraction to fuel the system and constant toxin purging to prevent poisoning. This diagram maps the primary command center. Structurally, it divides into the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system's branching nerves. Functionally, it splits into the somatic system for voluntary actions and the autonomic system for involuntary processes like digestion. This diagram shows the secondary control network, the endocrine system. Instead of firing instantaneous electrical impulses, these primary glands release chemical hormone signals. Together, they form a neuroendocrine link. The nervous system gathers sensory data from the environment and transmits it to the brain, which then triggers the endocrine glands to release hormones, regulating blood volume and internal temperature over time. These long-term chemical adjustments drive biological continuity. They dictate the onset of puberty, the maturation of the reproductive system, and the slow, ongoing physiological changes we refer to as aging. Human survival depends on this dual-axis control. Electrical impulses manage our instant reactions to immediate threats, while chemical hormones orchestrate the long-term adaptations necessary for the continuity of the species. The study of this machine is split into two distinct lenses. Anatomy is the study of the physical hardware, the rigid structural map of bones, cartilage, and tissues that dictate the body's permanent shape. Physiology is the study of the software. It observes the dynamic bioelectrical, mechanical, and biochemical functions operating within that structural framework. Historically, our understanding relied entirely on physical maps. Early physicians like Andreas Vesalius charted the human architecture through meticulous dissection of cadavers. Today, we map physiology in real time. These functional MRI scans show heat map activity inside a living brain, allowing us to watch the electrical and chemical systems process information as it happens. From non-living trace elements like calcium and iron up through 30 trillion cells, the human body organizes itself into integrated, interacting systems. The human body is an active, self-regulating architecture where microscopic processes continuously fight entropy to maintain the stable state of life.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we are diving into something incredibly personal. We are going on a journey to explore the most complex, fascinating, and just straight-up dynamic biological factory on the entire planet. And the best part? It's a factory you already own. We are exploring the architecture of you, the human body. We're going to break down the sheer, mind-boggling scale of what is happening inside you right at this very moment.
Okay, let's dive right into this. 30 trillion. That is the estimated number of human cells operating inside your body once you reach adulthood. It's a staggering, almost incomprehensible figure. But honestly, here's the wild part. You aren't even entirely human. Alongside those 30 trillion human cells, your body is currently playing host to roughly 38 trillion bacteria. So yeah, you are essentially a walking, talking, breathing ecosystem.
To make sense of this massive ecosystem, we're going to follow 6 clear steps today. We'll start with elements and code, move into tissues and organs, check out our transport systems, look at control and filtration, discuss the life cycle and threats, and wrap up with the study of ourselves. Starting off with Section 1, Elements and Code. To truly understand the whole picture, we absolutely have to start at the smallest possible scale. Before we're cells, before we're tissues, we are simply chemistry. It's honestly mind-blowing when you really stop and think about it. By mass, you are overwhelmingly made of just 3 basic elements. A whopping 65% of your body mass is just oxygen. Carbon comes in second at 18.5%, and hydrogen sits at 9.5%. Throw in a little nitrogen at 3.2%, and well, that is almost your entire physical being. All those other elements you hear about, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, they just make up the rest, with trace elements comprising less than 1% combined. These basic elements sit inside those trillions of cells and the water surrounding them to actually create life. And it's brilliant how those elements organize themselves into the fundamental unit of life, the cell. Think of your DNA as the ultimate blueprint, sitting safely protected right in the nucleus of the cell. Parts of this DNA code are copied and sent out via RNA, which is then used to create proteins. And proteins? They are the true workhorses. They dictate exactly how the cell functions and control gene expression. Meanwhile, the cell itself doesn't just float around in a vacuum. It sits in an extracellular matrix made of proteins like collagen and various fluids, which is what gives our body's actual physical structure. But here is a pretty sobering thought to take away from our microscopic view. The actual code that makes you is under constant attack every single day. On average, each cell in your body experiences tens of thousands of DNA damages. Tens of thousands. Your body has to actively repair these. If they aren't fixed or if they're repaired incorrectly, it can lead to mutations or genome alterations that literally threaten the viability of the cell. It's a microscopic battle for survival happening millions of times a second inside you. Moving to Section 2, Tissues and Organs. Now that we've got a handle on the elemental and cellular code, let's zoom out a bit. How exactly do we get from a single microscopic cell to a fully formed human? The answer is tissues. Tissues are essentially groups of cells teaming up to perform a specialized function, and studying this is called histology.
We've got four main types. Connective tissue, nerve tissue, and muscle tissue make up a whole lot of our bulk and movement. But I really want to highlight epithelia. These are your lining cells. They form the surfaces exposed to the outside world, like your skin. But they also form the endothelium that lines your internal cavities and blood vessels. They act as your body's ultimate security checkpoints, constantly regulating what is allowed to pass through. When these tissues combine, they form highly structured collections called organs, each with a very specific job. Most of your organs, think your stomach, liver, and lungs, are safely tucked away inside specific internal cavities. For instance, your lungs sit perfectly in the pleura. Here, the respiratory system meticulously pulls oxygen into tiny little air sacs called alveoli, while simultaneously pushing out carbon dioxide. It's all perfectly packaged to maximize space and efficiency.
All right, Section 3, Transport Systems. An organ can't survive in isolation. To keep this massive biological factory running and maintain a stable, balanced state, a crucial concept we call homeostasis, you need some serious logistics networks.
The human heart is the absolute engine of your circulatory system, and it has its own built-in electrical conduction system. It starts up top in the sinoatrial node, which fires off a signal that travels through the two atria, telling them to pump blood down into the ventricles. But here is the genius part. The signal deliberately slows down for just a fraction of a second at the atrioventricular node. That tiny pause is absolutely critical. It gives the ventricles time to fully fill with blood before they powerfully contract, pumping blood out to your lungs in a pulmonary circuit to grab oxygen, and then out in a systemic circuit to deliver that oxygen to the rest of your body. Now, while the circulatory system transports the fuel, the digestive system has to actually create it. It's kind of like a systematic assembly line running in reverse. It kicks off with mechanical chewing in the mouth, travels down the esophagus, and lands in the stomach where intense gastric acids extract nutrients to create a mixture called chyme. But the real unsung hero here is peristalsis. This is the rhythmic, automatic expansion and contraction of your muscles that literally squeezes and pushes food and chyme from one area of your gastrointestinal tract right along to the next.
It's amazing how interconnected the digestive organs are. The gastrointestinal tract itself is just a really long, winding tube, so it relies heavily on helper organs. The liver produces bile to help break down fats, the gallbladder acts as this little hollow, pear-shaped storage unit for that bile, and the pancreas releases essential enzymes. Working together, they take the food you eat and convert it into tiny, nutritional, non-toxic molecules that your circulatory system can easily pick up and deliver everywhere they're needed.
Next up, Section 4, Control and Filtration. With all that fuel and oxygen coursing through our veins, we need systems to actually direct the operations and, well, systems to take out the biological trash. Enter the nervous system, your body's ultimate command center. Structurally, it's split into two main parts. You've got the central nervous system, or CNS, which is your brain and spinal cord. Then you have the peripheral nervous system, or PNS, which encompasses all the nerve networks branching out into the rest of your body. Functionally, this system is a multitasker. It handles the things you actively think about, like your somatic nervous system helping you speak and move, and the things you never even notice, like your autonomic nervous system quietly regulating your blood pressure and digestion in the background.
And speaking of background processes, let's talk about filtration. 170, that is the number of liters of blood your two kidneys filter every single day. 170 liters, that's enough to fill about 85 2-liter soda bottles. They're constantly removing waste products and keeping your electrolytes perfectly balanced. But the craziest part? Out of those 170 liters of filtered blood, your body reabsorbs almost all of the liquid, ultimately producing only about 1 to 2 liters of actual urine to be expelled through the urinary system. It is an absolute masterpiece of recycling.
Let's look at Section 5, Life Cycle and Threats. As robust as these systems are, the human body isn't static. It exists on a timeline, and let's face it, it's vulnerable to the wear and tear of life. Our entire life cycle literally starts with the reproductive system. The whole journey kicks off with fertilization, the fusion of sperm and egg. This leads to the development of an embryo, then a fetus, followed by birth, childhood growth, and puberty, where the body matures. And eventually, as the years roll by, we all enter the inevitable biological process of aging, where our finely tuned systems naturally begin to slow down and change.
The crucial takeaway here is that throughout this entire life cycle, our body's homeostasis, that delicate, balanced state, is constantly under threat. For example, coronary artery disease is actually the leading cause of death worldwide. It happens when plaque builds up and narrows the arteries supplying the heart. But there are system-specific threats all over. Gallstones can block up the biliary tract. Epilepsy causes abnormal electrical activity in the nervous system. And renal failure happens when those incredibly hardworking kidneys we just talked about can no longer adequately filter waste.
Finally, Section 6, the study of ourselves. Because we face all these vulnerabilities, humanity has spent thousands of years meticulously observing, documenting, and studying the body to figure out how to heal it. When we study the body, we generally break it down into two primary fields. First, there's anatomy. That's the study of shape and form, mapping out the bones, tracing the blood vessels, learning exactly where each organ sits. Then there's physiology, which is the study of function, understanding how the electrical currents actually make the heartbeat, or how biochemicals break down our food. You really can't understand the human body without studying both the structure and the action. They go hand in hand.
And our understanding today builds on a massive historical foundation. Health professionals, anatomists, and artists have relied on physical models and diagrams for centuries to decode our internal architecture. We can trace this detailed anatomical study way back to Andreas Vesalius's famous woodcuts in 1543, which themselves built on the ancient foundational theories of Hippocrates and Galen, and eventually led to William Harvey's discoveries about blood circulation. Today, of course, we've traded some of those historical woodcuts for modern tech like MRIs and ultrasounds, but visual roadmaps are still absolutely essential for medical students trying to grasp the complexities of our internal layout.
But depictions of the human body go way beyond just medical textbooks. The physical form carries immense cultural weight. How we depict the body navigates some pretty complex societal spaces, crossing the lines between purely informational anatomical drawings, fine art, and erotic imagery. The way we view, study, and display the human body is deeply, inextricably tied to our culture, our laws, and our educational systems. It's never just biology. It's also about who we are as a society.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. We've traveled all the way from chemical elements to sprawling organ systems, right up to how we culturally view ourselves. You are a walking universe of 30 trillion human cells and incredibly complex systems working tirelessly every second of every day to keep you alive and in perfect balance. So, my question to you is this. Knowing what incredible, resilient, hardworking factory you are, how will you treat the architecture of you today? Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep exploring, and I will see you next time.